Hi everyone, it's Monty here from Gunpowder Spices. I'm setting up this YouTube channel to help you guys with the recipes that I've written for you. The way I'm going to be filming this is on a GoPro, so it's all going to be done in the first person, which means that you'll be able to see everything that I'm doing with my hands. You'll be able to see the way I'm managing the temperatures, exactly how much I'm adding, all of these things which I think are really useful. I've certainly cooked alongside videos a lot, and I think it's a really good way to understand and learn, and also kind of boost your confidence. It's not all about following a recipe. In fact, recipes can sometimes confuse you. You know, not everyone has the same palate, not everyone enjoys the same food. I think that cooking alongside videos is a really good way to understand and see how someone else is doing it. It might make you feel more comfortable learning that way, rather than just following a chunk of text written by someone else. Recipes are really useful tools, but it's really important for you not to completely rely on the recipe. Sometimes recipes can actually take the fun out of cooking. You know, it can stress you out even more, or not even more, because cooking is supposed to be fun. Sometimes it can be stressful if you're cooking something you're not comfortable with, and you haven't seen, and that's why I think video is really useful, because if you see someone else doing it, you know, it might be that you learn a different way, that you feel more comfortable seeing someone else doing it or cooking alongside someone else. Today we're going to be looking at the 5-spice duck, so let's get cracking. No. So let's get quacking. Oh my god.
Okay, we're back and we're going to do the 5-spice duck. The first thing you want to do, as it says in the recipe, is you want to make sure that your duck breasts are room temperature and you've blotted them dry. I've had these out for about half an hour or something. It just helps when you're cooking, there's not as much moisture. All you need to do, take your duck and a sharp knife. I just have those out. Later on in the video I can kind of explain and go through everything step by step. It makes it a bit more simple. So take your knife. When we're scoring, you don't want to score too close to the skin. You want to really just kind of get it gently, so it's nice, not very good. Just kind of coming apart just like that. So what we're doing the duck with today is Chinese 5-spice, and that's found in the Silk Road spice chest. It's the kind of Asian-y, Indian/Chinese-y one, which has 5-spice, nutmeg, star anise, Szechuan peppercorns, garam masala, fenugreek, mustard seeds, and cloves, I think. Maybe I've missed out one or two things, but yeah, you get the idea. So after we've scored each breast, that was probably a little bit too close, but as you can see, this fat's not very, there's not a very thick layer of fat here. If you get bigger breasts, you'll probably end up with a bit more fat on the top, so you won't have to be this careful when you're scoring it. The reason why you have to be careful and you don't want to score it kind of too close to the skin, when I mean skin, I mean the actual muscle itself, is when you're cooking it on the frying pan, you don't want the heat to get through this to the skin, or sorry, to the actual duck itself, because then it might scorch and burn. When we're cooking this, we're actually rendering this fat down for about 90% of the time, and the breast itself will only be cooked for a few minutes, as it says on the recipe. So wash my hands. Right, so what we want to do now is a generous amount of salt. What the salt helps to do is draw the moisture out of the fat itself, draw the water out. So as you'll see when we start cooking it, the fat's going to render off and a lot of juice is going to be left over, which we're going to keep for another time. You know, if you're making roast at the weekend, or I don't know, if you're just doing anything that needs oil, then duck fat is fantastic for that. So we've done our salt, get the pepper. So season them generously. And this time all we're seasoning is just the fat. We're not seasoning this until later on.
Then we're just going to season them in the pan itself.
What we want to do first is we don't actually turn the heat on to start with, so just get your duck in there. The reason why we don't put it on a high heat straight away is because when you do that, it's going to cause the duck to this part of the muscle to actually tighten, and that's not what we want. So we'll just heat that up for a bit. What we'll see happening slowly is the fat will start releasing into the pan and this will start browning up. So while that's going on, we will do the 5-spice mix. So what we want to do here, for 2 breasts that size, we'll probably do a teaspoon of this. 5-spice, smells delicious. 5-spice is a really, really important seasoning in Chinese cooking. It's made from Szechuan peppercorns, star anise, fennel seeds, cinnamon, and cloves. And so, you know, when you smell it, you'll get a very, I can describe it as velvety. It's very well balanced. It's quite sweet, but be sure not to use too much of it on this, otherwise it just completely overpowers everything. So as you can see here, the fat started rendering out. That's exactly what we want to see. So a bit of sesame oil, not too much. A splash of Shaoxing rice wine. If you don't have this stuff, then just use some sherry. Otherwise, if you don't have sherry, then you can use either rice wine vinegar. If you've got Japanese, then that would be ideal. But if not, then just a bit of rice vinegar will do. So give this a mix, have a taste. And a bit of honey. So that duck's rendering really nicely. Get the honey in there for a bit of sweetness. Because although the 5-spice is a little bit sweet from the cinnamon, I wouldn't say it's a predominantly sweet flavour. It's much more. It's fragrant. It's not sweet. I'm tasting that now. That's better. So I've got the oven preheated to 180. I could have put the duck straight in on this, but I'm going to do it on a tray. So line it with foil, get it warmed up in the oven. So let's have a look at how they're doing. Spatula. So starting to crisp up really nicely. Probably do with another minute or two. Just move them around a bit so they're not getting stuck. So you've got this mixture. Get our tray out. the duck. Yeah, beautiful. So you can see that's caramelised, lovely. The fat's reduced right down, and that's what you want to see. You don't want it to be much more kind of gold than that, because if you do let it go over, it will lose its flavour a bit. We'll put this over now. Also, when you are cooking duck, be a bit careful because the fat gets very, very hot, and when you're turning it, sometimes the duck can spit at you. Not literally spit at you, but you know, the fat comes off. So we just want to do these for a minute or two. In the meantime, I'll get the kettle on for our noodles. Right, so this has been probably on for a minute now. All we want to do is just seal it gently. You're not trying to actually cook it in the pan. You're just trying to seal it up, because if we did fry it in the pan, we'd lose all the juices. It's tasting delicious. We want to get our 5-spice mixture, have a little taste. Yeah, lovely. Nice and sweet from the honey, but it's also really well balanced by the 5-spice, the Szechuan wine and the sesame oil. So you just get it, you know, evenly. Don't be too, there's no need to be too, you know, particular about where it's going or anything. It's just lovely. Okay. So into the oven for 4 minutes. It's boiling. In the meantime, what we're going to do is chop up some herbs. So we've got lime juice, coriander, some spring onions, just to put through the noodles. So just a quick rinse. All my other knives are really crap, so I have to use this one, which I've had for about 7 years. Okay. So you want to take these, just very roughly chop. You can see my knife skills aren't incredible, but they'll do. When you start getting down to the whites, you want to keep those separate from the greens, because the flavour is a bit stronger, and so what I quite like doing is dicing them all up into much smaller bits in the green, because then you get, you know, they're far more evenly spread. You don't get that kind of oniony bite when you get when you bite into a whole one. So just chop, don't be too particular. So our duck's probably got about another minute or so, I'd say, before we take it out. When we take it out, we just let it rest for about 10 minutes or something. The reason why you let it rest is because when it's done cooking, its juices will come out. What you do by letting it rest is you let it suck its juices back in, becomes far more moist. You know, you don't have that flavour, those juices escaping from the meat itself. So, coriander's not great. You don't shop at Tesco's. But it will do. Okay, that should be enough. Just for me. Perfect. Now, what we've also got to do is the sauce. So, this can come out now, smelling delicious, quite pink, which I think we'll leave it in there for another minute. Right, so the sauce, we do 6 tablespoons of soy sauce. That's going well. Bit of sesame oil. Some shallotting, just a splash, not too much, and a bit of honey. Lovely. You can also add some ginger in. I'm not going to, just because. But that will add a nice complexity to it. So what we're trying to do with this sauce is we're not trying to, we're not trying to boil it or anything. We're just trying to warm it up and thicken it a bit. So that when you pour it over the duck, over the noodles, or whatever else you're serving it with, it keeps them warm, but also adds that lovely richness to them. So I reckon this is about done now. Yeah. And it's smelling really nice and fragrant. That lovely 5 spice. Make sure you don't go over the top on the 5 spice, because it can overpower if you put too much in, like anything, but it tastes wonderful. Don't be afraid to taste whilst you're cooking, that's half the fun of it. So you just want to leave them to rest for a few minutes. When we do the sauce, we'll also get our noodles on the go. Mix them. So you can see around the edges it's just started to bubble a bit. I mean, not too much, but yeah, that's what you want. You don't want it to be boiling, that's probably a tiny bit too hot. So this is what you want. You want a little bubbling. Beautiful. So we will get our noodles on. I just use these, they're easy. If you've got egg noodles, then just use those. Nothing fancy or particular, it's just easy. So put it in there. Lovely soy saucy aroma coming off. So you probably want to cook this for, we say, about another 2-3 minutes. While that's going on, we will just finish up with this. So we've got those done. Chop some coriander roughly, doesn't need to be too fine. That's doing there. Oops. Perfect. So this we're just going to put through the noodles when they're done. You can see this is starting to thicken up now. Still not quite the right consistency, but it's getting there. And that duck's probably got to rest for another few minutes, I would say. Some taste. Needs a bit more honey, I would say. This is why it's so important to taste, is because if I hadn't tasted, then it would have been a bit bitter. So lovely. I'll turn the heat down a tiny bit more. I think I might add a tiny bit more honey in actually, just because we want that lovely sweetness. It goes so well with the soy sauce. And as you can see now, it's starting to coat the spoon. This is about the right consistency. We don't want to overdo it. It's just really simple, easy. Lovely, that's perfect. Maybe a tiny bit too much soy, but it's delicious. Okay. So we'll just do our noodles very quickly. I know these are meant to be straight into a wok, but it's ready to go. Lovely. So that's what you want. You want a kind of nice syrup, not too thick, but also not too thin. So we literally just do this for a minute or two. You don't have to do it with noodles. You can do it with whatever you want. It works very well with couscous. You know, you can add things to it. As I said, I didn't put the ginger in. The ginger probably would have actually been quite a good shot. I would have cut the bitterness a little bit, but hey ho, still delicious. So literally, all I'm doing here is just warming the noodles up. In the meantime, we'll have a look at the duck. Look at that. Beautiful. Now it's got some fat coming out, but you can see it even from the outside. It's lovely and pink on the inside. You really don't want to overdo duck. It's one of those meats which is just best served medium rare or rare. You don't want it cooked the whole way through. It's just so these are basically ready. As I said, I'm not trying to cook them. I'm just trying to warm them up. Obviously, don't discard the juices. Keep the juices because they are delicious. It's the same if you're. Oh, that tastes amazing. Same if you're doing a gravy or anything. If you're roasting a joint of beef, you always want to make sure that you keep these juices, and you can add them into the gravy, and it just makes it taste so much better. So I'd say these are done. Drain them off. Lovely. Just get them into the bowl. There, get our spring onions in there. And coriander. White. Delicious. Put a bit of sesame oil in there. That's about a tablespoon and a half. So you can just give it a mix. Lovely. That smells so good and fresh. We'll also put a few sesame seeds on the top, but for now we'll get back to the duck. So to carve it, don't worry about anything that's on the knife. A little bit of an angle. You don't want the strips too thin because then they lose their heat. So as you can see, lovely and pink, perfectly cooked. Such a delicious meat duck, it's one of my favourites. Perfect. So, get a plate. This crap. Lovely. So, take the noodles, the greens, into the plate. Smelling so fresh and fragrant thanks to the coriander and the spring onions. Take your duck. It doesn't matter how you arrange it, you can just whack it on there. I usually wouldn't have 2 duck breasts, but I just thought for the sake of the recipe, making a right mess of this, aren't I? It made more sense. So obviously you'd have 1 instead of 2, which is why the plates might look a bit crowded. Okay, your spring onions, lovely. You want to get this lovely sauce. And just drizzle it over. Delicious. It does look rather wonderful. Yummy. I've also got some pickled chilies which I made just for a bit of colour. You see, you can use raw chilies as well, but I love pickled ones. So there we go. Let's have a taste.